Florida's late flurry of threes got them to the Final Four, but they needed a little Gatorade from Texas Tech.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into this live postcast edition of the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're coming at you just a little bit after Duke polishes off, Andy, a 20-point win over Alabama. We're obviously going to get to that in a little bit. We're your hosts. This is my guy, Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Schade, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making us your first listen or watch. And we want to remind you that you can catch every episode Amazon ad-free on Amazon Music. Much better than Amazon free on ad music, Andy. That would be a whole weird thing. Special shout out to all you everydayers joining us and all the great members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. We're so glad that you are all here. This episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Head on over to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. Need one now? Go ahead and grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized. Okay, Andy. There's only 5 D1 NCAA Tournament college basketball games left on the season. I'm already starting to grieve that. But tonight, part of that grieving process is joining Texas Tech in all their very sad tears because, oh man, that was a brutal way to lose. We're going to have to talk about that. And Florida's victory, we'll get to Duke just kind of playing with their food and beating up on Alabama. We'll look ahead to what this means for the Final Four and just get a little bit prepped for Sunday's final 2 Elite 8 games. But Andy, let's get right into this thing where the number 1 seed in the West, Florida, knocks off the final Cinderella team remaining, the number 3 seeded Texas Tech. For those of you listening, I definitely just put Cinderella in air quotes, just a little jab at our very chalky Elite 8 here. Andy, 84-79 was the final score. My question to you to get us going here: did Florida win this basketball game, or did Texas Tech just kind of choke it away down the stretch, or did we have a little bit of an amalgamation of both of these things?
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit of both. I think anytime, for context, Texas Tech was up by 9 with under 3 minutes to go in this game. It was 2:55 to go. That's when Tech had a 9-point lead. Anytime you blow a 9-point lead in less than 3 minutes, it was probably a confluence of factors. Going against Texas Tech was a very simple one, a very obvious one. You cannot miss the front end of 1-and-1s late in games. I mean, it's just an absolute killer. Everybody would tell you you have to make your free throws. We talk about teams that are poor free throw shooting teams as being dangerous teams to bet on coming into March. And this is why. Not that Tech is a particularly bad free throw shooting team, but when you don't execute down the stretch at the line, I mean, it's just killer. It's just absolutely killer. And Texas Tech had 2 opportunities. Their 2 best players, Darion Williams and JT Toppin. Toppin's not a great free throw shooter. Williams is, however, and both of them missed the front end of 1-and-1s. Meanwhile, Florida was just banging threes every time that Texas Tech got down the floor and missed their free throws. That's about the worst possible combination of things that can be happening for your team as you watch things slip away. And Thomas Haugh, incredible stuff from him for Florida. I mean, he had a great overall game, but he also knocked down 2 threes in the final 3 minutes of this basketball game. Walter Clayton tied it up with a 3, then gave them a lead with another 3 in this game. Didn't score for the first, I think, like 13, 14 minutes of this basketball game. Finished with 30 because of a tremendous second half, including 13 points at the free throw line for him. But yeah, I think it was a combination of both. I think Florida was masterful in hitting clutch shots down the stretch, which is what they needed to do, which is what they did against UConn. They've done it throughout this tournament. But yeah, I think ultimately at the end of the day, if Texas Tech makes the front end of their 1-and-1s, which you're expected to do, this might be a very different conversation.
Even just one of them, if Darion Williams had done it, the 80% free throw shooter, like we would have probably been fine. Andy, I mean, this is crazy. Yeah. Those 4 threes that Florida hit was in a span of 1 minute and 51 seconds.
Crazy.
And we've said all that. So yes, by the way, I should say, I agree with you. I think that Texas Tech did choke not a little bit, a lot of bit there. But even that doesn't matter if Florida doesn't go on an absolute heater from beyond the arc. And even if Florida goes on their heater from beyond the arc and Texas Tech hits their free throws, I think Texas Tech still wins. So I think both of these things are true. And Andy, we've said all that. And we also got to mention, this kills me too, but I understand it. The near 10-second violation that Texas Tech almost drew. So to set that up, to remind us all of it, at this point, Florida's only up 1, Andy. It felt like maybe in real time it was more than that, just because they had that onslaught of threes. They're up 78-77. Darion Williams misses a 3 that would have put him back up by 2. Elijah Martin gets a rebound. And Florida's just kind of being lackadaisical in the backcourt. And it gets to where the shot clock is at 21 seconds. If it literally ticks one more time, it's a 10-second violation. Texas Tech has the ball. Shot clock off. You can hold for the last shot in a game you're down 1. And I guarantee you know what would happen, Andy, the way the rest of that game went? If they had done that, they give the ball to Darion Williams, isolate him on the left side of the lane, and let him either make a bucket against, that bigger Florida front court, but a front court that has not handled him the entire second half, or pass if they double him, because I think they used that last time out to talk about that, or get fouled, and probably that time go make one or both of them. Andy, that's exactly what would have happened right there. But they commit the foul with 1 more second left to get to that 10-second foul. I mean, it's just brutal. But Andy, I can't blame them for that, because the coaching staff on the sideline is obviously telling them to foul. They needed to, but then as soon as they realized, like, oh, no, stop, don't foul, it was too late.
Yeah, just a really rough sequence of events. And again, I think had the other sequence of events not happened, had the 4 straight made threes from Florida not happened, had the missed front ends of the 1-and-1s, like, we're not even having a conversation about this. It's just one of those things that kind of on top of everything else, it looked like a glaringly bad mistake on TV. It was so frustrating to watch. Like, no, don't do it. And he commits the foul, and you're like, oh, that's an absolute killer for them. But again, I think in the heat of the moment, it's a much more understandable mistake. And again,
they're facing the sideline, right? They can't, right at half court, they can't see either shot clock right there.
Yeah. There's nothing they could have really done differently in that circumstance. It's just, again, it's magnified by the confluence of everything that happened around it that kind of made it stand out as a particularly ugly kind of way for this game to end for Texas Tech. But again, I think a lot of credit goes to Florida here. We can, lament Tech not knocking down their shots at the end of this game, which they needed to do. But Florida played tremendous down the stretch. I mean, we mentioned Clayton, 30 points for him in a game where he kind of offensively didn't seem like he really had it early going, finished with 7 of 14 shooting, 13 of 14 from the free throw line. But Thomas Haugh he was incredible in this game. And we've talked, you and I and our good friend Leif Tulin, our regular guest, and are also host of the game night shows on Saturdays. He talks a ton about Florida's front court and how great they are, and Thomas Haugh in particular. And in this game, he looked like one of the best players on the floor. He had 20 points off the bench, 11 rebounds. And what I really wanted to highlight, what stood out to me, is the fact that JT Toppin and Thomas Haugh had basically the exact same line, but their impact in this game was dramatically different. They both had 20 points. They both had 11 rebounds. But Toppin scored his 20 points on 22 field goal attempts, whereas Haugh scored his 20 points on 11 field goal attempts. Toppin was 2 of 3 from 3, which is great, but Haugh was 4 of 6 from 3, and Toppin was 0 of 5 from the free throw line, while Haugh was 4 of 4. A far more efficient offensive performance from Haugh. He did it in a similar amount of playing time, but obviously far less shot attempts. Just really fantastic stuff from him. He was good defensively. He had a steal and a block. He had a pair of assists. I was incredibly impressed by what Thomas Haugh was able to do in this game on a day where Alex Condon was okay, but not great. Ruben Chinyelu was fine, but he didn't score much. He only had 2 points. He only played 11 minutes in this game. They needed Haugh to step up, and he had an outstanding performance.
India, I've got to wonder, speaking of Condon, like, I know he started, but I wonder if his ankle was giving him a little bit of trouble. I didn't really notice him being gimpy, but still, like, just even the thought of it. As for Toppin, I really thought this was one of the first times I've seen, like, him being a little bit undersized as a big really affect his game. Like, I really thought he was overthinking Florida. On the other hand, Darion Williams, all 6'6" of him, was not affected, right? Like, I just mentioned earlier, him getting in a little iso ball, little bully ball with both Haugh and Condon. I mean, he just pushed him around and scored. It was phenomenal stuff. But Toppin wasn't able to navigate that as well. And I just thought, as I was watching the game, I thought, I wonder what NBA scouts are thinking as they watch that happen, because that's the size he's going to face on a nightly basis at the sport's highest level, Andy. Really interesting stuff. Hey, we got to mention here Elijah Martin. Florida Gator, makes it back to the Final Four for the second time in 3 years. Obviously, he was part of that FAU magical run helmed by Dusty May. And it's interesting, we've talked about it quite a bit, but there were 4 members of that team actually 5 members of that team on the left side of this bracket when you include Nick Boyd and San Diego State, who were in the play-in game that would have come into the South region. But you also had Dusty May and Vlad Golden at Michigan, who lost in the Sweet 16 to Alabama. You had John L. Davis at Arkansas, who lost in the Sweet 16, interestingly enough, to this Texas Tech team. But congrats to Elijah Martin, man. That's so cool to make it. I wonder how many players, and this is going to be more normal, Andy, in our new era, but how many players have made it to the Final Four with 2 different teams? It's crazy. It's like, do you know, like, I know you're a baseball guy. You know, I think it didn't happen last year, but Will Smith, the relief pitcher, had won 3 straight World Series with 3 straight different teams in 21, 2, and 3, I think it was. Or maybe it was 2, 3, and 4. I can't remember. But it's like that kind of thing. It's crazy. It doesn't happen often. Congrats to Elijah Martin.
I have to imagine that even if it has happened before, which I don't have those numbers, that data in front of me, Martin doing it at 2 different schools in the state of Florida has probably never happened before. That just seems like an insanely strange anomaly and the kind of record that he might hold for a long time. But also somebody might point out in the comments that it actually has happened before. Who knows? We'll perhaps find out soon, but really excited for Elijah Martin. Tremendous player who gets an opportunity to compete for a national championship once again. But Isaac, we got to move on here, talk about this Duke-Bama game. Far less exciting out of the 2 matchups that we got on Saturday evening.
Unless you're a Blue Devil, then it was
that's true. That's true. Duke has shot over 50% in each of their games in the NCAA tournament. They coasted past an ice-cold Alabama team to make their 2nd straight Final Four. We're going to talk about that game coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, we are all about the stats here at Locked On because numbers, well, they don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team plus gear wherever you need to go. And it's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. So whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. So take your adventure to new heights with the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. All right, Isaac, continue our conversation here as we now have 2 teams of the Final Four set, with 2 more games, of course, on Sunday to get us to that final group of 4 teams. Want to talk now about this Duke win over Alabama. And in case for people who are live with us, who watched the game, you kind of know how this thing played out. For those of you who are joining us a little bit later, who maybe didn't watch the game and just saw that Duke had a 20-point win, it never felt like a 20-point win. It never felt like a game that Duke was going to win that handily. But it also never felt like at any point in this game that Duke was going to lose. Like Duke jumped out to a 15-5 lead and basically maintained a lead between like 8 and 12 points for like almost the entire game. They were up 9 at halftime. It felt like I think a few times Bama got it within 6, maybe they got it within 5, but they never really seriously challenged to regain the lead. And Duke never really pushed ahead by more than like 12 or 15. I think like with like 5 or 6 minutes to go, there was a point where John Shire just looked kind of exasperated on the sidelines. And the broadcaster said like, oh, John's just ready for his team to finally put this thing away. And then they did. And that's exactly what happened, is they finally got enough strung together enough stops in a row that they ended up building a 20-point lead and coasting 85-65. Isaac, it wasn't Cooper Flagg's best game, but it's undeniable the impact that he has on this basketball game. And also 16 points, 9 boards for a true freshman who should be a high school senior. It's not like it's a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, but the impact that he had on this basketball game, even when he's not making shots, is just, we haven't seen a lot of players ever do what he's able to do on the basketball court.
And Andy, I think that's part of why NBA front office execs are salivating right now, because he is a guy that affects winning in so many ways. Whether, if he's not scoring or not shooting well as he didn't tonight, Con Knippel was, gosh, dude, quick aside, Con Knippel is so freaking good at basketball, Andy.
Yeah.
Like unreal, like his IQ, anyway, that 2-man game that he and Malawach play all the time. I like, it's so hard to guard. Anyway, with Flag, his understanding and awareness of the game of basketball on both ends of the floor and how to impact things on a game when he's not scoring at a high level, his ability to defend, to stay in front of a Mark Sears, for example, and not let him get anywhere. It's just his comprehension at 18 years old, not only offensively, but defensively, it's otherworldly good, dude. And we've said it often this year. I know he doesn't do it in the same way that Zion did. That's who I always compare it to, because it feels like that level of impact. But that doesn't mean it's any less impactful on winning basketball.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Flag's, it's the IQ, it's just the understanding of his role and what's asked of him, and the ability to not force shots on a day where maybe the shot making isn't there. And he set the tone in this game. In the first possession of the game, Alabama went under on a screen and dared him to shoot a three, and he knocked it down. It was only 3 he made on the entire game, but that sets a tone of like, hey, I know you're giving me the shot. Look, I can do it. And it forces Alabama to have to recalibrate and make some adjustments. And then when Flag realized, the shots weren't necessarily falling, he's looking for, opportunities to make plays for other teammates. Con Knipple kind of just took over, like you said. I mean, he had 21 in this one. He was perfect, 7 of 7 from the free throw line, knocked down a pair of threes, had 5 boards and 5 assists. Just a really balanced performance from him. And again, Flag finding his teammates, getting everybody involved, and was excellent defensively. You mentioned it. The defense on Sears, they had possession about 4.5 minutes to go, where Sears pump faked and started to try to drive left and just ran into a brick wall. There was Cooper Flag, who didn't fall for the fake, who knew he was going to drive left. Yes, in theory, at this point, since Mark Sears has been playing since the 90s, you should probably know that he's going to go left. But it was still such a great, Sears was just absolutely stunned. He couldn't get going that way. He kind of tried to fight through it, ended up turning it over. Just the awareness and just overall kind of basketball IQ that Flag has is something that you have to remind yourself constantly how young he is, and the fact that he should still be in high school makes everything that he does all the more impressive in a game like this, where he kind of commanded everything with 2 of the best teams in college basketball playing, and led his team to a comfortable win.
Andy, you mentioned it in the tease for this segment that Duke has hit 50% or more of their shots in all 4 of their NCAA tournament games. It's crazy, dude. This offense is at another level. At Ken Palm right now, they are number 1 in offensive efficiency. But Andy, you said this, and I'll set it up and just let you talk about it some. But as good as their offense has been, it is truly their defense which is ranked 5th in Ken Palm defensive efficiency, that is so game-changingly good. As you look at it, what you talked about, what they did to Sears. I've seen them do that, just being a guy that covers the ACC so often, to small guards so often, like RJ Davis. They've guarded him incredibly well the previous 2 years, just putting length on him in the form of Proctor or somebody like that, and just making life miserable. And that's what happened to Sears. Just looked like flabber. Like, what do I do? I can't do anything. And as I look at this thing, whether it's Houston or Tennessee in the Final Four, and then whoever they would meet if they make it to the national championship game, Malawach, his imposing, he's not the shot blocker that, who was their big 2, not last year, obviously, because Flip had to play a small 5. Lively, thank you. Lively was a much better shot blocker than his Malawach. But Malawach's presence, how do you get past that, man?
Yeah. Just an outstanding performance from Duke defensively. And again, I think Duke goes out, scores 85 points, nearly shoots 50, 40, 90 in the game. And we're talking more about their defense, because they were that good. And again, the flip side of that is Alabama scored 113 points against BYU. And then 2 days later, they scored 65, nearly half. That is, yes, part of it was Bama missing shots they didn't miss against BYU, but even if you flip it, even if Bama shot as well on open shots in this game as they did against BYU, I still don't think they win. I think that Duke's length just it limited their ability to even get open looks from 3. It completely stymied their offense. One of the things that Duke does better than almost anybody in the country is force the opponents into long possessions.
Yes.
Their average possession length for their opponents this year is 360th in the country. So literally they hold opponents to one of the longest possessions in all of college basketball, according to KenPom. Alabama likes to play fast. They like to get shots off early in the shot clock. They like to get up and down, have a high possession basketball game. Again, Bama shot 51 threes against BYU in part because there was a ton of possessions in that game. They only got 32 threes up in this game because, again, in part because the length was just not giving them open looks from three, but also because they just weren't able to get as many possessions. And I think it really took Nate Oates' team out of their comfort zone. You mentioned Mark Sears, and we've had a lot of conversations recently about these veteran guards, these fifth year guys, fifth year guys who we know are graduating, who kind of went out on a high note. Caleb Love goes out on a monster game. John L. Davis goes out on a monster game. Like, we've seen a handful of guys go out with these like huge performances, and unfortunately not the case for Mark Sears, a tremendously talented player, but he had a very bad game here. 6 points, 6 assists, 5 turnovers. He was 2 of 12. He was 1 of 5 from three. His three was at a kind of a clutch time. One of the last times that Bama seemed like they were in this game. Grant Nelson got a steal, and then Mark Sears hits a three, but after that it was just curtains. A great performance from Duke defensively. This is what makes this team so dangerous, is they can hang 85 on you on a highly efficient offensive night while also putting your team in a torture chamber defensively. And it's just, I don't know how you beat this team when they're playing like this on both ends of the floor.
And Cooper Flagg didn't shoot well. And
yeah, exactly.
And, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
nuts stuff. Good on the injury front. Good to see Malik Brown get out there again and get a couple minutes. I just wanted to highlight in particular. There was a play when Alabama, I can't remember which half it was, forgive me. They had cut it to 6, had just gotten a defensive stop. 3, I think, Crimson Tide were right there to get the rebound, and they all just kind of like a bomb dropping, and everybody stood around and watched it. And Malik Brown picks it up, kicks it out to Caleb Foster for a 3, and we're right back to a 9-point game. It's just, that's not winning basketball, right? Mm-hmm. And that was just part of like, all right, Alabama's not going to win this basketball game. Well, Andy, the dream of an all-SEC Final Four is dead. Maybe the nightmare for some people who are out in the streets celebrating on this Saturday evening. But we could be still on track to have all 4 number 1 seeds for the first time and just second ever since 2008. We'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you about our friends at 5 Hour Energy. Look, daylight savings time has snuck up on us again, and I hate this one because it's when you lose an hour of sleep. And if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep like Andy and I are, man, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, outdoors, doing whatever you're doing, but sometimes you need a little boost to help you power through. So whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament like we all did together, whether you're squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever it is you need it. Look, we have been staying up, Andy and I, way too late. Like I got to get up in 5 hours and 4 minutes to go catch an airplane to fly down to Dallas to record with Andy and all our other great friends for the bracket breakdown. But man, when we're doing that, 5 Hour Energy is just the jolt we need to keep us going the next day. And so whether I'm at a game or whether I'm on the road traveling, 5 Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. So head on over to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12 or 24 pack delivered right to your door. But maybe you need one now and you're like, Isaac, I can't wait for it to be delivered right to my door. Good news. You can head on over to your local convenience store or grocery store, grab you a 5 Hour Energy shot. Find it, man. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Andy, after Florida's win over Texas Tech, we started to wonder, okay, we've got 2 big storylines still on the table here. Either we are in line for the possibility of, for the first time ever, having the Final Four be all from one conference, or if Duke wins, we're in line for the possibility of having all of the Final Four be the 1 seeds for the first time since 2008, just the second time ever. That Final Four was Kansas, who beat Memphis in the national championship game. Kansas had beaten North Carolina in the semifinal, and Memphis had beaten UConn, Michigan State. I'm going to have to look while you talk, but Andy, crazy stuff, and we could see it happen. I see you typing, so maybe you're looking it up and already have the answer.
I did not pull the answer. I'm going to let you do that because you wanted me to talk, so I'm going to go ahead and talk. I don't think I don't think most fans wanted all 4 SEC teams. It certainly would have been historic. And historic is good in a lot of ways, although I think a lot of people were hoping to see some of those SEC teams go down. We obviously did see that with Duke's win over Alabama. But either way, we have the possibility for some history here. And I think even if it's split, even if we don't get all 4 1 seeds, one thing we could get is 3 SEC teams and Duke, which I don't know, for people who are anti-SEC or anti like the bigs, they like the mid-majors, they like the upsets. I don't know if it's better to have 4 SEC teams or 3 SEC teams and Duke. Like, I don't know how much of a difference that necessarily makes.
That's a good point.
Yeah, like Duke in the eyes of most college basketball fans, they're not an SEC team, but they're like kind of an SEC team. They function the same way in terms of how fans might perceive them.
Like the Yankees, for example.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes, they are the Yankees of college basketball. I think that's a very fair assessment. But
I wonder how many people are like, I like the Yankees and Duke and the Lakers and the 90s Cowboys.
See, the Lakers is where you lose me, because if you like Duke and the Yankees, I'm like, okay, at least they're both like located on the East Coast. I know they're not super close to each other, but it's like once you're like Lakers, Cowboys, or whatever, then it's like, all right, I'm
okay. Well, let me switch it to the Celtics. How about the Celtics?
Yes, there you go. You go. So what I'm interested in seeing now is whether we know we're going to get all 1s and 2 seeds, because like you said, the Cinderella, the darling of the Elite Eight, Texas Tech, a 3-seeded team that was top 10 in KenPom all year long, they go down. So I'm interested to see kind of how this thing plays out. Obviously, we know we got Florida and Duke. And then on Sunday, the 2 games that we have, I'll give you the times for these games as well. Number 2 seed Tennessee takes on number 1 seed Houston. That's the first game on Sunday, 2:20 Eastern time. Both these games will be on CBS. FanDuel favoring Houston in that one by just 2.5. And then you have 2 seed Michigan State taking on 1 seed Auburn, 5:05 Eastern time, or just 30 minutes or so after that first game. FanDuel favoring Auburn in that one by 5.5. So there's still hope for the Big Ten to get a team into the Final Four. Right now, we have the ACC team, and then we have an SEC team. But there's still hope for the Big Ten. There's still hope for the Big 12 if Houston is able to get a W here after Texas Tech falls. So very interested to see what ends up shaking out here. But again, no trendy Cinderellas here. We're not going to see if San Diego State can make it to the. We're far past the point of seeing games like that. But Isaac, it would be fun. It's always fun when you get the Shaka Smart VCU teams, or the Loyola Chicagos of the world. But this is some pretty incredible basketball. We had 4 great teams who played on Saturday night, even if the game between Duke and Bama wasn't particularly close. And we're going to have 2 games on Sunday that I'd be pretty surprised if either of these ended up a blowout, just with the play styles of both these teams. This is going to be a really fun matchup. And again, from the SEC perspective, you get Tennessee in. Not only is that another chance to get 3 out of 4 in the SEC, but Tennessee has never been to a Final Four. So they're not an underdog by any stretch, but they could be doing something historic. So there's still a lot to watch for on these 2 games.
And that would guarantee the SEC gets at least 1 team in the championship game, because No, I'm sorry. That's on the same side of the bracket as Duke. So that does not actually do what I just said it was going to do. Andy, by the way, the other Final Four team in 2008, I should have realized this, and I'm kicking myself on it, was UCLA, because it was the 3rd year of that 3 straight years of UCLA making the Final Four under head coach Ben Howland.
This is Howland, right?
You what?
I was going to say it's Howland, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What a memory that is. Remember that guy?
Yes.
And so, Andy, that's really interesting. But, you said the possibility of Duke and the 3 SEC teams. We joked on a show recently. I can't remember. There's so many shows we just talk and talk and talk. But, Andy, if those 3 SEC teams make it and then Duke wins the national championship, I feel like how hilarious would that be, given all the season-long conversation about how strong the SEC is and all the season-long conversation about how weak the ACC is. It would just be poetically hilarious to see Greg Sankey all upset about that, right? But it also fits the narrative that you were talking about the other day, where this is the 3rd time that one conference has had half the Elite Eight. And then we kind of realized in real time, like, oh, neither of those first 2 times did that conference actually win the national championship. It was the Big East in 2009 and North Carolina won. And then it was the ACC in 2016 and Villanova won on the Chris Jenkins shot. So a lot of just interesting through lines here, Andy.
Yeah. Lots of different things that could happen here. And it's funny because we'll have plenty of time in the off season, probably soon into the off season, because this will be a fresh topic to discuss the parity in this tournament. And I think there's some consternation, some fear that some folks have about like NIL and the transfer portal is making it harder for the little guy to win. And certainly there's a longer conversation about the truth of that, because there is truth to that in some degree. But we've in the very recent past, in the NIL era, have had a lot more parity than we got in this tournament. Sometimes there's just years where there's not a lot of parity. Like sometimes that happens. And sometimes you have, like the St. Peters of the world and those various other crazy runs that 15 seeds winning games, which used to never happen and then happened like 3 years in a row or something like that. So I don't think that we can make any widespread conclusions, but last year felt like UConn and Purdue were kind of on a crash course to get to the national championship game, and then they did. And this year, it feels like the storylines for the college basketball season have been the SEC is great, Duke is great. And here we are staring down the barrel of potentially having 3 SEC teams in Duke, where the only spoiler could be Houston, which is not exactly a major spoiler in that conversation either. So again, longer conversations to be had about the future of college basketball and what this means. But for right now, I can tell you what it means. We're going to have 2 really, really good basketball games on Sunday. And then we got 3 more really good basketball games next weekend as well. And I am so excited to get to recap the games on Sunday live with you, Isaac, in Dallas. Part of the bracket breakdown, our final trip out to Dallas. Very excited for that. And then you and I got a lot of shows next week to preview these big games as we get a sense of what's going to happen in the Final Four and the national championship. And then we got a whole off season to get to some more content there. So excited for all of that. But folks, that is going to wrap it up for us tonight here on Locked On College Basketball. I want to thank all of you for making this show your first listen. I want to say apologies to the Lawyer family as they were eliminated yesterday. Let's go Wild Popes. Still feeling good about the direction that program's in. Cheers to the McBruins after landing Donovan Dent out of the transfer portal. And until Sunday live in Dallas, peace out.